The air conditioning in the Maricopa County Superior Court is set to exactly 68 degrees. It is a deliberate tactic, I suspect. It keeps the lawyers awake, the judges alert, and the defendants shivering. I sat at the defendant's table, shivering not from the cold, but from the sheer indignity of the sweater I was wearing. It was an oversized, mustard yellow cardigan with a stain on the cuff that looked like coffee or perhaps dried soup. It wasn't mine. I would never purchase something so shapeless. My daughter, Kymberly, had picked it out for me this morning. She told me it was cozy. She told me I looked sweet in it, but I knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't dressing me for comfort. She was dressing the set. She needed the judge to look at me and see a confused, deteriorating 77-year-old woman who couldn't button her own coat, let alone manage a pension portfolio worth 7 figures. I slumped in my chair, rounding my shoulders just enough to look frail. I let my gray hair, usually pinned back in a tight French twist, hang loose and messy around my face. I looked like a woman who had given up. Across the aisle, in the witness stand, sat Kymberly. If I looked like a cautionary tale, Kymberly looked like a savior. She was wearing a white linen suit that I knew cost more than my first car. Her hair was a glossy, expensive blonde, blown out to perfection. She held a lace handkerchief in her hand, dabbing at the corner of her eye with the precision of a surgeon. "It just breaks my heart, Your Honor," Kymberly said, her voice trembling just enough to register as sincere on the court recording. "Mom has always been such a strong woman. But the decline, it's been rapid. She forgets to eat. Last week, I found $3,000 in cash stuffed into an old shoe box under her bed. She thought the banks were closing. She's paranoid. She's confused. I just want to protect her dignity." I watched her through my smudged reading glasses. I watched the way she tilted her head to the left, exposing her neck, a subconscious submission, signal designed to make the judge feel powerful. I watched the way her tears stopped flowing the exact second the court reporter paused to adjust her typing stand. It was a magnificent performance. Truly, if this were a community theater production in Scottsdale, I would have given her a standing ovation. But this wasn't a play. This was a hearing for emergency permanent guardianship. Kymberly wasn't trying to win a trophy. She was trying to win control over my life, my home, and the government pension I had spent 35 years earning. "Ms. Torres," the judge said, looking down at Kymberly with a sympathetic expression, "you are asking for full control of the estate immediately without a temporary observation period." "I don't think we have time for observation, Your Honor," Kymberly pleaded. "She's vulnerable. Just yesterday, she tried to wire money to a prince she met on the internet. If I hadn't stopped her, she would have emptied her savings. I just want to keep her safe. I'm her only family. I'm the only one who cares." The judge nodded slowly. He was a middle-aged man with a receding hairline and a watch that caught the fluorescent light every time he moved his hand. I focused on that watch. From 20 feet away, it looked like a Rolex Submariner, a $15,000 timepiece. But I squinted slightly. The bezel was too thick. The second hand didn't sweep smoothly. It ticked. It was a fake, a high-quality replica, probably bought for $300 online. That told me everything I needed to know about this judge. He cared about appearances. He wanted to look successful, even if the substance wasn't there. He was exactly the kind of man Kymberly knew how to manipulate. He turned his gaze toward me. His eyes were filled with that condescending pity people reserve for toddlers and the very old. "Ms. Grayson," the judge said, speaking loudly and slowly, as if I were deaf, "do you understand why we are here today?" This was the moment. I could have sat up straight. I could have cleared my throat and told him that I spent 3 decades as a senior field agent for the Internal Revenue Service. I could have told him that I didn't audit mom-and-pop bakeries. I audited multinational corporations and executives who thought they could hide assets in the Cayman Islands. I could have told him that the shoebox Kymberly mentioned didn't exist, and that Internet Prince was a complete fabrication. But if I did that, I would look defensive. I would look agitated. I would look exactly like the paranoid woman Kymberly claimed I was. So, I engaged the Colombo Protocol. I learned this from a detective I worked with in the 90s. The smartest person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. If you want to catch a liar, you don't scream at them. You let them talk. You let them get comfortable. You let them think they are the cat, and you are the mouse. I adjusted my glasses with a hand I deliberately allowed to tremble. I blinked rapidly, looking around the room as if I didn't know where I was. My voice was a whisper, raspy and thin. I just want to go home. Kimmy, the cat. I don't remember if I fed the cat. I saw the corner of Kymberly's mouth twitch. A smirk. A tiny, victorious smirk that she hid behind her handkerchief. She thought she had me. She thought her mother, the woman who taught her how to balance a checkbook, had finally lost her marbles. See, Your Honor? Kymberly sighed. She doesn't even have a cat. We had to put Whiskers down 4 years ago. She's living in the past. The judge sighed, scribbling something on his notepad. Thank you, Ms. Torres. It seems clear that Ms. Grayson is struggling with reality. I watched my daughter cry those fake crocodile tears, and I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. Have you ever had someone mistake your kindness for weakness? Someone who smiles to your face while holding a knife behind their back. If you believe the truth always comes out in the audit, please like this video. It helps us share this warning with others. Kymberly wiped her dry eyes and looked at me with a sad smile. Don't worry, Mom. We're going to get you taken care of. You won't have to worry about money ever again. She was right about one thing. I wouldn't have to worry about money, because unlike Kymberly, I knew exactly where every single penny was. She thought she was looking at a senile old woman clutching a scrapbook on her lap. I looked down at my hands. Resting on the knees of my stained yellow cardigan was a heavy, black, 3-ring binder. It was battered at the corners. It looked like something you'd find at a yard sale, filled with old recipes or knitting patterns. Kymberly hadn't even bothered to look inside it when she dragged me out of the house this morning. She was so focused on getting my banking passwords that she ignored the garbage I insisted on bringing. But this binder wasn't garbage. It was a forensic audit. For the last 6 months, while Kymberly thought I was napping in front of the television, I was working. I was tracking the routing numbers she used to siphon money from her real estate clients. I was pulling the public tax records she thought were hidden behind shell companies. I was documenting the wire transfers she made to a casino in Las Vegas while claiming she was at a spiritual retreat. She stood there in her white suit, looking like an angel of mercy, asking the state of Arizona to hand her the keys to my life. She thought this hearing was her coronation. She thought she was about to seize a government pension that would pay off her debts and fund her lifestyle for the next decade. She forgot who raised her. She forgot that I didn't just file taxes. I hunted people. I hunted people who thought they were smarter than the system. I hunted people who thought that if they wore a nice enough suit and drove a leased Range Rover, nobody would notice they were broke. I looked up at the judge, keeping my mouth slightly open, keeping my eyes vacant. Can I stammered, clutching the binder tighter. Can I keep my book? It has my pictures. The judge softened. Of course, Ms. Grayson. You can keep your pictures. Kymberly rolled her eyes, just barely. She checked her watch. A Cartier tank. Also a fake, I noted. The strap was the wrong shade of leather. She was impatient. She wanted this over. She wanted the gavel to bang, so she could put me in a home and start liquidating my assets. I took a slow breath. The cold air of the courtroom filled my lungs. Let her have her moment. Let her think she's the predator. Let her think the trap has snapped shut on me. She doesn't realize that I'm not the prey. I'm the bait. And when I open this binder, she isn't going to get a guardianship. She's going to get an indictment. To understand why I was sitting in that courtroom wearing a mustard-stained cardigan, you have to go back exactly 1 year. You have to understand that criminals rarely start with the big heist. They practice. They work their way up. And my daughter, Kymberly, had been practicing for a long time. I spent 30 years working for the IRS. Specifically, I worked in the lifestyle audit division. My job was simple but brutal. I looked at people who reported an income of $30,000 a year, but drove cars worth $80,000. I looked at restaurant owners who claimed they were losing money, but somehow bought a vacation home in Aspen. I learned one universal truth during those 3 decades. Flashy people are usually broke people. If someone feels the need to wear their wealth on their sleeve, the logos, the leased luxury cars, the heavy jewelry, it is almost always because they are trying to outrun a mountain of debt. Wealth whispers, debt screams. And my daughter Kymberly was screaming. Kymberly lives in a gated community in North Scottsdale. She drives a white Range Rover that she washes twice a week. She calls herself a luxury real estate agent. And if you look at her Instagram, you would think she sells a mansion every Tuesday. She posts photos of champagne toasts and open houses with infinity pools. But I'm not an Instagram follower. I'm an auditor. And I noticed the cracks in the veneer years ago. I noticed that the Range Rover was a lease, and she was over the mileage limit. I noticed that the red-bottom Louboutin shoes she wore to Sunday brunch were scuffed at the heel and charged to a credit card she was paying the minimum balance on. I noticed that she stopped talking about closing deals and started talking about cash flow issues and market corrections. Kymberly was drowning. She was living a $10,000 a month lifestyle on a $3,000 a month income. And when the math doesn't add up, desperate people look for a lifeline. Enter Tanya. I met Tanya once at a charity luncheon Kymberly dragged me to. Tanya was a senior placement consultant. She had cold eyes and a smile that showed too many teeth. She told me she helped seniors transition to a more manageable lifestyle. I knew instantly she was a shark. I just didn't realize she was teaching my daughter how to hunt. About 18 months ago, Kymberly's debts hit a breaking point. Her credit cards were maxed out. Her car payment was late. She needed a lot of money, fast. That was when Tanya introduced her to the guardianship grift. It is a terrifyingly simple scam, and it is perfectly legal if you know which judges to bribe and which doctors to pay off. Here is the blueprint Tanya gave my daughter. Find a senior citizen who has assets, a paid-off house, a robust 401k, nice jewelry. But more importantly, find a senior citizen who is isolated, someone whose spouse has died, someone whose children live out of state, or who never had children at all. Then you manufacture a crisis. You befriend them. You gain entry to their home. Then you go to a court, usually on a Friday afternoon when the judges are tired and want to go home, and you file an emergency ex parte motion. You claim the senior is confused. You claim they are wandering the streets. You claim they are being scammed by internet fraudsters. Because it is an emergency, the senior doesn't even have to be there to defend themselves. The judge signs the paper. You show up at their house with the police. You remove them for their own safety. You put them in a facility. And then the feeding frenzy begins. Once you are the legal guardian, you control the assets. You sell the house to a friend for under market value and take a kickback. You sell the jewelry at a pawn shop. You drain the bank accounts to pay yourself a fiduciary salary for managing their life. Kymberly didn't start with me. I was too close. I was too sharp. She started with strangers. The first victim was Mrs. Higgins. She was a widow who lived 3 streets over from Kymberly. She was 82, a retired schoolteacher who loved gardening. Kymberly started bringing her casseroles. She started driving her to the pharmacy. Then, one day, Mrs. Higgins disappeared. Kymberly told the neighborhood that Mrs. Higgins took a turn for the worse and had to move to a facility. A week later, there was a for sale sign on Mrs. Higgins's lawn. Kymberly listed the house. It sold in 3 days to an LLC I later learned was owned by Tanya's husband. Mrs. Higgins's diamond wedding ring, it ended up on Kymberly's finger. She told me she bought it at an estate sale. Then it was Mr. Henderson, a retired engineer with a bad knee, but a brilliant mind. Kymberly convinced a court he was hoarding trash. They locked him away in a secure unit. Kymberly used his savings to pay off her credit card debt. Then the Rothsteins. Then a woman named Ms. Clark. 5 lives. 5 homes liquidated. 5 bank accounts drained. Kymberly churned through them like an industrial shredder. For a year, she was flush with cash. The debt collectors stopped calling. She bought a new purse. She went on vacation to Cabo. But the problem with stealing is that you always need more. You spend the stolen money faster than you earned it because you didn't respect the labor it took to get it. By last month, the well had run dry. Kymberly had burned through the proceeds from her last victim. The lease on the Range Rover was up for renewal. The country club dues were unpaid. She was desperate again. She needed a new target, a target with a heavy government pension that paid out like clockwork every month, a target with a house in Scottsdale worth $1.2 million, free and clear. She looked at me. She didn't see her mother. She didn't see the woman who sat up with her when she had the chicken pox. She didn't see the woman who paid for her college tuition. She saw an asset class. She saw a balance sheet waiting to be acquired. The first strike happened at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I sleep lightly these days. My phone was on the nightstand, charging. It buzzed once. A single, sharp vibration in the quiet room. I put on my glasses and picked it up. It was a text message from my bank's fraud department. Security alert. We detected a failed login attempt on your primary checking account. IP address location, Scottsdale, Arizona. Device, iPhone 14 Pro. I froze. I don't use an iPhone. I use an Android. But I knew exactly who had an iPhone 14 Pro. Most mothers would have called their daughter right then. They would have panicked. They would have said, "Kimmy, someone is trying to hack me. Help." That is what Kymberly was counting on. She wanted me to panic. She wanted me to call her in a frenzy so she could swoop in and say, "Oh, Mom, you're confused again. You probably typed the password wrong. Let me help you fix it. Just give me the code." But I didn't call. I sat up in bed in the dark. The streetlights from outside cast long shadows across my quilt. I felt a coldness spread through my stomach that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the icy realization of betrayal. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a glitch. It was a probe. My daughter was testing the perimeter fences. She was checking to see if the locks were secure before she tried to kick down the door. I didn't reply to the text. I logged into my account from my secure laptop. I changed my password to a 30-character alphanumeric string that Kymberly would never guess. I set up 2-factor authentication to route to a burner email address she didn't know existed. Then I lay back down. But I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, and I realized that my retirement was over. I wasn't just a grandmother anymore. I was back on the job. Kymberly thought she was the hunter because she had successfully taken down 5 helpless seniors. She thought she was smart because she knew how to file a court motion. But she was sloppy. She was arrogant. She left fingerprints everywhere because she had never been audited. She didn't know that the victim she just targeted had spent 30 years tearing apart financial schemes far more complex than hers. Instead of confronting her, I went quiet. Silence is the auditor's best weapon. When you go silent, the guilty get nervous. They make mistakes. They get bold. I decided right then, in the dark at 3 a.m., that I wasn't just going to stop her from taking my money. I was going to find out exactly what happened to Mrs. Higgins and Mr. Henderson. I was going to open a file on my own daughter. Kymberly wanted a guardianship. Fine. I would give her a show. But while she was preparing her courtroom speech, I would be preparing the one thing she feared most, the black binder. The next morning, I began the hardest job of my life. I had to pretend to be the one thing I had spent 77 years proving I wasn't. Incompetent. It started at the kitchen table. Kymberly had come over just to check on me, which meant she was sniffing around for loose financial documents. She sat across from me, sipping an almond milk latte she had bought with a credit card that I suspected was already maxed out. I had arranged the props perfectly. I left a stack of unopened mail on the counter, bills mostly. I left my checkbook out, slightly askew, with a pen uncapped next to it. I picked up the electric bill, stared at it for a long moment, and then looked at Kymberly with wide, watery eyes. "Kimmy," I said, letting my voice waver. I can't remember. Did I pay the gardener this week? I feel like I gave him cash, but now I can't find it." I saw Kymberly's eyes light up. It was subtle, just a flicker of the pupils, but I caught it. It was the look a shark gives when it smells blood in the water. "Oh, Mom," she said, putting on her sympathetic voice. "You probably misplaced it. You know how forgetful you're getting. Don't worry about the gardener. I'll handle him on my way out. Do you have any cash on hand?" "I think there's $200 in the tin by the fridge," I whispered, rubbing my forehead as if I had a headache. Kymberly stood up. She walked to the tin. She took the money. "I'll take care of it," she said, slipping the cash into her designer purse. I knew for a fact that the gardener was on a monthly auto draft schedule. He had been paid 3 days ago. Kymberly wasn't going to pay the gardener. She was going to pay for her manicure. "Thank you, sweetie," I said. "I don't know what I'd do without you." That was the green light. Once a thief thinks the security cameras are off, they stop sneaking. They start grabbing. Over the next 2 weeks, Kymberly's visits became frequent. She started helping me sort my mail. She would open my bank statements and tut-tut about the fees. She asked for my debit card PIN so she could pick up groceries for me. I gave it to her. Every time she used that card, she thought she was stealing. She didn't realize she was creating a paper trail. I monitored everything from my secure laptop in the locked study when she was gone. Tuesday, $154 at Whole Foods. I checked the fridge. She brought me a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread. The rest went to her house. Thursday, $80 at the gas station. My car had been sitting in the garage for a week. She was filling up her Range Rover. Friday, $300 withdrawal from the ATM near the casino. She was emboldened. She thought I was fading. She thought the guardianship grift was going to be a walk in the park. But while Kymberly was busy stealing crumbs, I was hunting for the whole cake. One Tuesday morning, Kymberly texted me that she was showing houses and wouldn't be by until dinner. That gave me an 8-hour window. I dressed quickly. I didn't wear the frumpy clothes Kymberly liked. I put on my tailored gray blazer, the one I used to wear when I was conducting field audits. I put on my driving glasses. I got into my sedan and drove straight to the Maricopa County Recorder's office in downtown Phoenix. I love government buildings. Most people find them depressing, filled with bad lighting and bureaucracy. I find them comforting. They are libraries of truth. People can lie on Instagram. They can lie to their mothers, but they cannot lie on a deed recorded with the county. I sat down at one of the public terminals in the back. The air smelled of old paper and toner. I cracked my knuckles and began typing. Search, grantee/grantor. Name, Torres Kymberly. The screen populated. There were hits, dozens of them. I felt a chill go down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. There was Mrs. Higgins's house. Grantor, Martha Higgins. Grantee, Torres Care Management, LLC. Date of sale, October 14th. Sale price, $350,000. I knew that house. It was a mid-century modern in a prime neighborhood. It was easily worth $600,000. Kymberly had sold it to her own LLC for half its value. That is called self-dealing, and it is highly illegal for a guardian. I kept scrolling. Mr. Henderson's condo. Sold. The Rothstein estate. Sold. A property belonging to a Ms. Clark. Sold. In every single case, Kymberly Torres was listed as the guardian or power of attorney just weeks before the property was liquidated. But where did the money go? I pulled up the filing documents for Torres Care Management, LLC. Kymberly had been sloppy. She listed herself as the registered agent. But when I looked at the banking information attached to the liens, I noticed something interesting. The bank wasn't in Arizona. The routing number started with digits I recognized from my days tracking money launderers in the hospitality industry. It was a bank in Nevada. I sat back in the hard plastic chair. Nevada. If Kymberly had kept the money in an Arizona bank, this would be a state crime. It would be a matter for the local police or adult protective services, who are often overworked and underfunded. But Kymberly had moved the proceeds of a crime across state lines. That changed everything. That made it wire fraud. That made it interstate racketeering. That put it under the jurisdiction of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And unlike the local police, the FBI has forensic accountants who are just as good as I used to be. I printed everything. I printed the deeds. I printed the LLC formation documents. I printed the tax liens that showed Kymberly hadn't paid property taxes on her own home in 2 years, proving her motive was financial desperation. The stack of paper was 3 inches thick. I left the recorder's office and drove to an office depot. I walked into the aisle with the school supplies. I didn't want a flimsy folder. I needed something substantial, something that would make a thud when it hit a judge's bench. I bought a heavy-duty 3-ring black binder. I bought a set of color-coded dividers. I drove home and went into my study. I locked the door. I started assembling the case file. Tab 1, the motive. Kymberly's debts, her car lease, her unpaid taxes. Tab 2, the pattern, the 5 other victims, the dates of guardianship, the dates of liquidation. Tab 3, the theft, my bank statements showing the ATM withdrawals and the gas station charges. Tab 4, the federal crime, the Nevada banking connection. As I punched holes in the documents, I felt a heavy sadness settle over me. This was my daughter. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike. I remembered her prom night. But then I looked at the deed for Mrs. Higgins's house. I remembered Mrs. Higgins. She was a sweet woman who brought me lemons from her tree. She died alone in a cheap facility because Kymberly wanted a new purse. Kymberly wasn't my daughter anymore. She was a predator, and a predator doesn't stop because you ask them nicely. A predator stops when you put them in a cage. I realized then that I couldn't just reveal this information to Kymberly. If I confronted her now, she would run. She would shred documents. She would hide the money in cryptocurrency or offshore accounts where even I couldn't find it. I needed to catch her in the act of something undeniable. Stealing groceries wasn't enough to get her a long sentence. Self-dealing on real estate was bad, but she might plea bargain her way out of it, claiming administrative errors. I needed a violent felony. I needed a crime against a person. I needed false imprisonment. If Kymberly used the legal system to physically remove me from my home against my will, knowing she had no grounds to do so, that was kidnapping by fraud. That carried a mandatory minimum sentence. I closed the black binder. It snapped shut with a sound like a pistol cocking. I had to let her do it. I had to let my own daughter call the police on me. I had to let her drag me out of my home. I had to let her lock me in a facility. It was the most dangerous audit I had ever planned. If I miscalculated, I would rot in a nursing home while she spent my pension. But if I timed it right, if I could get her to say the words under oath in a courtroom, I could end her reign of terror forever. I heard Kymberly's car pull into the driveway. She was early. I shoved the black binder into my knitting bag. I messed up my hair. I took off my blazer and put on the stained yellow cardigan. I went into the living room and turned on the TV to a cartoon channel. I sat there, staring blankly at the screen. The front door opened. "Mom." Kymberly called out. "I brought you dinner." "Is that you, Tanya?" I asked, using the wrong name on purpose. Kymberly walked in. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and greed. She smiled. "It's Kymberly, Mom. Tanya is my friend. Don't you remember?" "Oh," I said. "I'm so confused today." "I know," she said, reaching for her phone. "But don't worry. I'm making a plan to help you." I watched her thumbs flying across the screen. She was texting Tanya. She was initiating the endgame. "Go ahead, Kimmy," I thought. "Make your plan. But never forget who taught you how to count." I needed a bunker. My house wasn't safe anymore. Kymberly had keys. She popped in unannounced at all hours, claiming she was checking my blood pressure. But really she was checking to see if I had left my wallet unattended. I couldn't work on the black binder at home. If she walked in and saw me building a spreadsheet detailing her wire fraud, the game would be over. She would realize I wasn't senile, and she would run. So I found a sanctuary Kymberly would never set foot in, the Silver Spoon Diner. It was a small, greasy spoon place on the edge of town, tucked between a dry cleaner and a tire shop. It smelled of bacon grease, old coffee, and lemon polish. The booths were cracked vinyl, and the lighting was harsh. Kymberly, who refused to eat anything that wasn't farm to table or served by a waiter in a vest, would rather starve than be seen here. It was perfect. Every morning at 7 a.m., I packed my laptop and the black binder into my knitting bag. I drove to the Silver Spoon, took the booth in the far back corner, and ordered black coffee and wheat toast. This is where I met Leo. Leo was my server. He was 22 years old, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of too much work and not enough sleep. He wore a name tag that was slightly crooked. He was thin, the kind of thin that comes from skipping meals to save money. I watched him the way I used to watch the junior agents at the IRS. I looked for efficiency. I looked for attention to detail. Leo never let my coffee cup get below the halfway mark. He remembered that I liked my toast dry, no butter. He moved through the chaos of the breakfast rush with a quiet, mathematical precision. He didn't waste steps. He stacked plates according to size. He calculated bills in his head before he even reached the register. One Wednesday, about a week into my investigation, the diner's Wi-Fi went down. I was in the middle of tracing a $5,000 transfer from Mrs. Higgins's estate to a Mercedes dealership. I needed to cross-reference the VIN number. I clicked refresh on my browser, but the little wheel just spun. I let out a frustrated sigh, louder than I intended. Leo appeared at my table instantly with the coffee pot. "Router's acting up again, Mrs. Grayson," he said. He knew my name because he had seen it on my credit card. "The owner is too cheap to upgrade the modem. Here." He pulled his own phone out of his apron pocket. He tapped the screen a few times and set it on the table next to my laptop. "I turn on my hotspot. You can use my data. It's faster anyway." I looked at the phone, then at him. "Data plans cost money. I can't take your data, Leo." "It's unlimited," he shrugged. "Besides, you look like you're working on something important. You have that audit face, Dot." I froze. "Excuse me?" He smiled, a tired, lopsided grin. "My professor has the same look. The something doesn't add up look. I'm studying accounting at Arizona State. Night classes." I looked at him with new eyes. An accounting student, a kid who understood that numbers were a language. "You want to be an accountant?" I asked. "Forensic accounting," he corrected. "I want to catch the guys who steal pensions. My dad, he lost his retirement in a scam a few years ago. Never got it back. I figure if I learn how they hide the money, maybe I can stop it from happening to someone else." I felt a shiver go down my spine. Fate is a funny thing. I was sitting here trying to stop a predator who stole pensions, being served coffee by a boy who dedicated his life to stopping the same thing. I looked at the screen of my laptop. I looked at the black binder. I needed a backup. I needed insurance. If Kymberly succeeded in getting the guardianship, and there was a high probability she would, given how well she manipulated the system, she would take everything. She would take my laptop. She would burn the binder if she found it. I would be locked in a room with no way to contact the outside world, and all my evidence would disappear. I needed someone on the outside, someone who understood what they were looking at. "Leo," I said, my voice low, "sit down for a minute." "I have tables, Mrs. Grayson," he said, glancing at the door. "It's a slow morning," I said. "Sit, please." He sat on the edge of the booth seat. I turned my laptop screen toward him. I had a spreadsheet open. It was a sanitized version of the Torres audit. I had removed the names, labeling them Subject A and Victim 1, 2, 3. "I have a hypothetical for you," I said, "since you're studying forensics. Look at these cash flows. Tell me what you see." Leo rubbed his eyes and leaned in. He adjusted his glasses. For a minute, he was silent. He scrolled down. He scrolled back up. He muttered something under his breath. "This is messy," he said. "Be specific." I commanded. He pointed to column D. "Okay, so Subject A claims to be a property manager. But look at the inflows. Large, round numbers coming in from the victims' accounts. 30,000 here, 50,000 there. That's not rent. That's liquidation." He scrolled to the expenses. "And look at the outflows," he continued, his voice getting stronger. "Subject A isn't paying for care. See these transfers to Nevada LLC? That's classic layering. They're moving the money out of state to make it harder to trace. And here, these debit card transactions. Luxury goods. Travel. This person is robbing Peter to pay Paul. They take money from Victim 2 to cover the legal fees for Victim 1. It's a churn." He looked up at me. His face was pale. "Mrs. Grayson, this isn't a property manager. This is a Ponzi scheme running under the guise of a guardianship. Whoever Subject is, they are bleeding these people dry." He nailed it. In 5 minutes, this 22-year-old waiter had diagnosed the crime that the Arizona court system had missed for 2 years. "You're good," I said. He didn't smile this time. He looked at me, and then he looked at the knitting bag where the black binder was poking out. He looked at the frustration on my face. "This isn't hypothetical, is it?" he asked. I took a sip of my black coffee. "No, it is not. Is it you? He asked. Is someone doing this to you? Not yet, I said. She's trying. It's my daughter. Leo sat back. He looked sick. Your daughter? The one who drives the white Range Rover? The one who came in here once and snapped her fingers at me to get a refill? That's her. Leo shook his head. She tipped me $2 on a $60 bill. That sounds like Kymberly, I said. She's broke, Leo. She's stealing from elderly people to keep up appearances. And I'm next on the list. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a silver USB drive. The night before, I had made a digital copy of everything. The tax returns, the deeds, the photos of Mrs. Higgins's ring, the recordings of Kymberly lying to me about the bills. It was all encrypted on this drive. I placed the USB drive on the table between the salt shaker and the sugar packets. Leo, I am going to ask you to do something dangerous, I said. I am going to ask you to hold evidence in a federal criminal investigation. Leo looked at the drive. He didn't flinch. What do I have to do? I am going to disappear, I said calmly. Probably in the next 48 hours. My daughter is going to come for me. She is going to bring the police. She is going to have a court order claiming I am insane. I am going to let her take me. Let her. Leo whispered. Mrs. Grayson, we can call the cops now. We can show them this. No, I said firmly. Local police don't understand wire fraud. They will look at this and see a civil dispute. They will side with the daughter who claims she is helping her confused mother to get a conviction. A real conviction that puts her in prison for 20 years. I need her to commit the crime of false imprisonment. I need her to cross the line. I pushed the drive toward him. When she takes me, she will strip me of everything. My phone, my laptop. She will lock me in a facility and drug me if she can. I won't be able to contact anyone. Leo picked up the drive. He closed his fist around it. There is a hearing scheduled for next Tuesday, I said. Maricopa County Superior Court. 9 a.m. It will be for permanent guardianship. She thinks she will walk in there, cry a few tears, and walk out with my pension. I looked him dead in the eye. You need to be there, Leo. You need to sit in the back row. And when I give the signal, when I drop the act, you need to bring that drive to the judge. Can you do that? Leo looked at the drive in his hand. He looked at the textbook on the table, Principles of Forensic Accounting. This wasn't a classroom exercise. This was the real thing. He had a chance to stop the kind of monster who ruined his own father. I'll be there, Leo said. Tuesday, 9 a.m. I won't let you down. If I'm not there, I added, my voice hardening, if for some reason she doesn't bring me to court, if I just vanish, you take this drive to the FBI field office on 7th Street. You ask for Agent Miller. Tell him Hilda Grayson sent you. Tell him the black binder is ready. Leo nodded. He slipped the drive into his pocket, right next to his order pad. I got you, Mrs. Grayson, he said. At that moment, the front door of the diner chimed. I looked up. A white Range Rover was pulling slowly through the parking lot, prowling. Kymberly was looking for me. She must have driven past my house, seen my car was gone, and started hunting. She's here, I whispered. Leo stood up instantly. He grabbed my empty plate. Go out the back, he said quickly. Through the kitchen. It dumps you out in the alley behind the tire shop. You can loop around to your car. Thank you, Leo, I said. Go, he urged. I'll stall her if she comes in. I grabbed my bag and the black binder. I hustled through the swinging doors into the steamy, noisy kitchen. The cooks looked at me, surprised, but I kept moving. I pushed out the back emergency exit into the blinding Arizona sun. My heart was hammering in my chest. I felt alive. I felt terrified. I made it to my car just as I saw Kymberly walking into the front door of the diner. She wouldn't find me. Not today, but she would find me soon. The timeline was accelerating. She was getting impatient. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel. I had the evidence. I had an ally. Now, all I had to do was walk into the trap. I drove home to wait for the knock on the door. I made sure the black binder was sitting on the coffee table, looking harmless, looking like the ramblings of a confused old woman. I was ready to be captured. It happened at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday. I knew it would be Friday. In the world of high-stakes audits and legal maneuvers, Friday afternoon is the witching hour. It's when you file the motions you don't want anyone to see until Monday morning. It's when judges are tired, clerks are watching the clock, and the system is at its weakest. I was sitting in my living room, drinking a cup of lukewarm tea. The house was quiet. The black binder was on the coffee table in front of me, sitting on top of a stack of Better Homes and Gardens magazines to make it look innocuous. Then came the sound I had been waiting for. 3 sharp raps on the front door. I didn't get up immediately. I took a slow breath, centering myself. I looked around my living room, at the Persian rug I bought in Turkey 30 years ago, at the framed photos of Kymberly on the mantel from when she was innocent and toothless. I said a silent goodbye to my home. If this went wrong, I would never see this room again. If this went right, I would be back, but everything would be different. I heard the key turn in the lock. Kymberly didn't wait for me to answer. She had a key, of course. The door swung open, letting in the blinding Scottsdale heat. "Mom." Kymberly's voice called out. It wasn't the sharp, demanding voice she used when she wanted money. It was the soft, syrupy voice she used when she was performing. "Mom, are you home? I brought some people to help us." I stood up slowly, clutching the collar of my stained yellow cardigan. Kymberly walked in. Behind her were 2 uniformed Scottsdale police officers and a woman wearing a lanyard that identified her as a crisis social worker. Kymberly looked immaculate. She was wearing a pastel linen dress that made her look like a concerned churchgoer. Her face was pinched with worry. "Oh, thank goodness," she breathed, rushing toward me, but stopping just short of a hug. She turned to the officers. "See, she's just standing there staring. She's been like this for days." The taller officer stepped forward. He was young, clean-shaven, with kind eyes. He took off his hat. "Ma'am, my name is Officer Miller. We're here to do a welfare check. Your daughter is very worried about you." This was the pivot point. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to straighten my spine, pull out my retired federal identification, and tell Officer Miller that my daughter was a con artist running a Ponzi scheme. I could have ended it right there. I could have shown them the binder. I could have proven I was sane, safe, and sober. But if I did that, Kymberly walks away. If I stopped her now, she would just claim it was a misunderstanding. She would say she overreacted out of love. The courts would slap her on the wrist. She would lose the guardianship petition, sure, but she would stay free. She would find another victim, someone without an IRS background, and she would destroy them instead. To catch a predator, you have to let them bite. You have to let them commit the crime. Specifically, I needed her to commit false imprisonment and kidnapping by fraud. I needed her to physically remove me from my home against my will using a court order obtained through perjury. Once she moved me across the threshold of that door, she wasn't just a bad daughter anymore. She was a felon. So I didn't speak calmly. I didn't show my ID. I screamed, "Who are you?" I shrieked, backing away and knocking over a small side table. The lamp crashed to the floor. "Get out! Get out of my house. You're the spies. You're with the internet prince." It was the performance of a lifetime. The officers flinched. They exchanged a look, the look that said, "Yep, The daughter was right. She's gone. Mom, please, Kymberly cried, putting a hand to her mouth. These aren't spies. They're police. We're trying to keep you safe. You want my money? I yelled, pointing a shaking finger at her. You want to give it to the shadow people. Kymberly turned to the social worker, tears welling in her eyes. You see? She thinks shadow people are stealing her money. Last week she tried to wire $50,000 to a scammer in Nigeria because she thought he was her boyfriend. I can't leave her here alone. She's going to hurt herself. The social worker nodded sympathetically. She opened a folder and pulled out a document stamped with the court seal. Ms. Grayson, the social worker, said gently, because of your confusion and the danger you pose to yourself, the court has issued an emergency ex parte order. Your daughter has been granted temporary guardianship. We need to take you to a safe place where you can get evaluated. Ex parte, without the party present. Kymberly had gone to a judge this morning, lied under oath, and stripped me of my civil rights without me even being in the room. No, I yelled, grabbing the back of the sofa. I won't go. This is my house. I paid my taxes. I know, Mom. I know, Kymberly said, moving closer. It's just for a few days. Just for a checkup. She nodded to the officers. They stepped forward. They were gentle, but they were firm. They took me by the arms. Ma'am, we need you to come with us, Officer Miller said. We don't want to handcuff you. Please don't fight us. I let my body go limp, sagging against them. I let out a sob, a real one, because the reality of what was happening was terrifying, even if I had planned it. I was losing my freedom. I was putting my life in the hands of the legal system, and I knew better than anyone how broken that system could be. Okay, I whispered, defeated. Okay. Kymberly let out a long exhale, her shoulders dropping. She thought the hard part was over. She thought she had won. I need her keys, Kymberly said to the officer. And her phone. She calls the bank 50 times a day, confusing the tellers. The judge said I need to restrict her communications. Give them to her, ma'am, the officer said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my house keys and my cell phone. I handed them to Kymberly. As her fingers closed around them, I saw a flash of pure greed in her eyes. It wasn't concern. It was ownership. She was holding the keys to a $1.2 million asset. She was holding the phone that controlled the two-factor authentication for my accounts. She clipped the keys to her belt loop. I'll take good care of everything, Mom. Can I sniffled, wiping my nose on my sleeve. Can I take my book? I want a scrapbooking. I pointed to the coffee table, to the black binder sitting on the stack of magazines. Kymberly glanced at it. She saw a beat-up $3 binder from Office Depot. She saw something worthless. She didn't bother to open it. She didn't bother to check if it contained photos of grandchildren or bank records from Nevada. To her, it was just trash. And Kymberly didn't care about trash. Fine, she said, waving her hand dismissively. Take your scrapbooking. Maybe it will keep you quiet in the car. I reached out and grabbed the black binder. I hugged it to my chest like a teddy bear. Thank you, Kimmy, I whispered. The officers led me to the door. The heat of the Arizona afternoon hit me like a physical blow. My neighbors were watching from their windows. I saw Mrs. Gable across the street peeking through her blinds. To them, it looked like a tragedy. Poor Hilda Grayson, losing her mind, being taken away by her loving daughter. They didn't see the truth. They didn't see that I wasn't being arrested. I was being deployed. I was an undercover agent walking into a hostile environment. I had my evidence. I had my cover story. And now, thanks to Kymberly's arrogance, I had the crime. She walked behind me, checking her phone. Probably texting Tanya. Probably scheduling the estate sale liquidators for Monday morning. As they led me to the car, Kymberly squeezed my hand. She thought she was leading a lamb to the slaughter. She didn't know she was holding the hand of the butcher. If you want to see a predator get audited, subscribe now. Get in the car, Mom, Kymberly said, opening the back door of her Range Rover. The leather seats were hot. We're going to a nice place. They have a garden. I climbed in. I clutched the binder. The door slammed shut, sealing me inside. I looked through the tinted glass at my house. Kymberly was standing in the driveway, talking to the police, thanking them for their service, flashing that charming smile. She looked so powerful. She looked untouchable. She had no idea that she had just driven the getaway car to her own funeral. Where are we going? I asked, keeping my voice shaky as she climbed into the driver's seat. Paradise Valley Care Center, she said, starting the engine. It's very exclusive. I knew Paradise Valley Care Center. I had looked it up in the public records. It was owned by a shell company connected to Tanya. It had 3 citations for health code violations in the last year. It was where Mrs. Higgins died. Okay, I said. Do they have bingo? Kymberly laughed. It was a cruel, short sound. Sure, Mom. They have bingo. She put the car in drive. We pulled away from the curb. I closed my eyes and visualized the spreadsheet in the binder. I visualized the federal sentencing guidelines for wire fraud. I visualized the look on her face when the judge opened this book. Drive fast, Kymberly, I thought. The faster we get there, the sooner you go to prison. If you have never been inside a state-funded, for-profit memory care facility, be grateful. The brochures always show sunlight streaming through clean windows and happy seniors playing checkers. They use words like community and dignity. The reality of Paradise Valley Care Center hit me the moment the automatic doors slid shut behind me. It wasn't visual, it was olfactory. It smelled of industrial-strength bleach fighting a losing battle against the scent of urine and boiled cabbage. It was the smell of hopelessness. Kymberly had dropped me off like a bag of unwanted clothes at a donation center. She signed the paperwork at the front desk, handed over my bag, which contained a toothbrush, a change of underwear, and my black binder, and kissed me on the forehead. Be good, Mom, she had said, her eyes already scanning her phone for her next appointment. I'll come visit on Sunday. She wouldn't come on Sunday. I knew that. She was going to spend the weekend liquidating my jewelry box. I was led to room 3B. It was a semi-private room, which meant I shared a bathroom with a woman who screamed in her sleep. The walls were a depressing shade of beige, scuffed from years of wheelchairs bumping into them. There was no garden view. There was a view of a brick wall and a dumpster. For the first 2 days, I kept my head down. I sat in the plastic chair in the corner, clutching my binder, watching the staff. They were overworked and underpaid. They moved the residents around like inventory. But the moment that truly hardened my heart, the moment that turned my mission from a legal audit into a holy crusade, happened on Monday afternoon in the day room. I was sitting by the window, pretending to look at a magazine, when a nurse wheeled in a woman who looked vaguely familiar. She was slumped to the side, her head lolling on her chest. Her white hair was matted at the back. She was wearing a hospital gown that was tied loosely at the neck. It took me a moment to recognize her, without her sun hat and gardening gloves. It was Mrs. Higgins, who used to live 3 streets over from Kymberly. Mrs. Higgins, who had prize-winning roses and used to bring me lemons from her tree. She was the first victim Kymberly had helped. I stood up, my legs shaking, and walked over to her. Martha? I whispered. Martha, it's Hilda, Kymberly's mother. She raised her head slowly. Her eyes were glassy, filmed over with the heavy sedation they used to keep people quiet in places like this. She looked at me, but she didn't see me. She let out a low moan and plucked at the sheet covering her legs. Roses, she mumbled. Need to water roses. I looked at her hands. Her fingernails, once stained with rich potting soil, were now clean and brittle. She wasn't living here. She was waiting to die. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. Kymberly had done this. She had taken a vibrant woman, stripped her of her home, her garden, and her dignity, and dumped her in this warehouse so she could buy a Range Rover. I touched Mrs. Higgins's hand. I'm going to get you out of here. Martha, I promised. I'm going to get us all out. I went back to my room. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up with my binder, reviewing the file on Dr. Ayres. Dr. Gregory Ayres was the facility's consulting psychiatrist. According to the court documents I had pulled, he was the medical professional who signed off on every single one of Kymberly's guardianship petitions. He was the rubber stamp. He certified that Mrs. Higgins was incompetent. He certified that Mr. Henderson was a danger to himself. And tomorrow, he was coming to certify me. He arrived at 10 a.m. on Tuesday. Dr. Ayres was a small man with nervous energy and a suit that was too shiny. He walked into my room without knocking, followed by a heavy-set nurse carrying a clipboard. He didn't look at me. He looked at his watch. "Good morning, Miss Grayson," he said, flipping through a file. "I'm Dr. Ayres. I'm just here to have a little chat, see how we're settling in." I sat on the edge of the bed. I had put on the stained yellow cardigan again. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I stared at his tie. I want to go home. I whined, pitching my voice high and thin. My daughter said this was a hotel. Dr. Ayres sighed. He checked a box on his form without even looking up. "Yes, well, we need to make sure you're safe first. Your daughter tells me you've been having trouble with money, giving it away to strangers. The shadow people." I whispered. "They take the coins." He nodded, checking another box. "Delusional thinking. Paranoia. And you get confused about where you are?" he asked. Is this the airport?" I asked. He smirked. He looked at the nurse. "Okay, I think we have enough. Classic vascular dementia with paranoid delusions. I'll sign the permanent competency waiver." He was about to destroy my life in under 3 minutes. He was about to sign a legal document that would strip me of my rights forever based on 3 sentences and a hunch. I needed the room clear. "Water," I rasped, grabbing my throat. "I need water. Please." Dr. Ayres looked annoyed. He gestured to the nurse. "Get her a cup of water, would you? From the station down the hall. The tap here isn't great." The nurse nodded and lumbered out of the room. The heavy door clicked shut. It was just me and Dr. Ayres. He was scribbling his signature on the bottom of the form. The sound of his pen scratching against the paper was the only noise in the room. I sat up straight. I rolled my shoulders back. I took off the smudged reading glasses and placed them neatly on the bedside table. I reached down and picked up the black binder. "Dr. Ayres," I said. My voice wasn't high and thin anymore. It was low level and commanded the absolute authority of a federal agent who had broken CEOs and cartel accountants. He stopped writing. He looked up, confused by the sudden change in tone. "Excuse me," he said. "Put the pen down," I said. He blinked. "Miss Grayson, I know you're upset, but—" I said, "Put the pen down. Unless you want to add falsifying medical records to the list of felonies you are currently committing." He froze. The pen hovered over the paper. He looked at me, really looked at me, and saw that the confused old woman had vanished. In her place was a shark. "Who are you?" he whispered. "My name is Hilda Grayson," I said, opening the binder on my lap. "For 30 years, I was a senior field agent for the Internal Revenue Service, Large Business, and International Division. And you, Doctor, are the subject of my latest audit. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a squeak. This is ridiculous. You're a patient. You're confused. Am I? I flipped the binder open to tab 4. I turned the book so he could see the spreadsheet. Let's look at the numbers. Numbers don't get confused, doctor. Numbers don't get dementia. I pointed to a highlighted row. On October 15th of last year, the same week you signed the competency waiver for Martha Higgins, you received a wire transfer of $5,000 from Torres Care Management, LLC. That is my daughter's shell company. His face went pale. On December 12th, I continued, tracing the line with my finger, you signed the order for Mr. Henderson. 2 days later, another $5,000 hit your personal account at Chase Bank. Routing number 021000. I recited the routing number from memory. I saw his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed. That is unreported income, doctor, I said. I pulled your tax returns for the last 3 years. You didn't declare any of these consulting fees. That's tax evasion. But because the money came from the proceeds of a fraudulent guardianship scheme, it's also money laundering. And because you used the banking system to do it, it's a wire fraud conspiracy. I closed the binder. Snap. I did the math. I said calmly. Based on the federal sentencing guidelines, you are looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. You'll lose your medical license. You'll lose your pension. You'll lose your freedom. And you won't be in a facility like this. You'll be in Leavenworth. He dropped the pen. It clattered onto the linoleum floor. He looked at the door, wondering if he could run. Don't bother, I said. The evidence is already backed up on a secure drive with a third party. If I don't walk out of here, that drive goes to the FBI. He slumped against the wall. He looked small. He looked like every tax cheat I had ever cornered, sweaty, terrified, and looking for a deal. What do you want? He asked, his voice shaking. I can't let you go. Your daughter has the emergency order. If I discharge you, she'll just take you somewhere else. I don't want you to discharge me. I said, I want you to write your report. He looked confused. But I want you to write the truth, I said. I want you to conduct a real evaluation, right now. Ask me the questions. I will answer them perfectly. And then you are going to write a medical opinion stating that Hilda Grayson is alert, oriented, highly intelligent, and fully competent to manage her own affairs. Your daughter will kill me, he whispered. She expects the waiver. You aren't going to give it to her, I said. You are going to seal the report. You are going to tell her that due to court protocols, the evaluation has to be submitted directly to the judge at the hearing next Tuesday. You tell her it's done. You let her believe she won. I leaned forward. Then, on Tuesday, you show up at the Maricopa County Superior Court. When the judge asks for your opinion, you hand him the real file. You turn state's witness. You testify that Kymberly Torres pressured you to falsify these records. Why would I do that? He asked. I'll incriminate myself. Because if you do it, I said, I will tell the FBI that you cooperated. You might still lose your license, doctor, but you might stay out of a cell. That is the only deal on the table. Take it or leave it. The door handle turned. The nurse was coming back with the water. Decide. I hissed. Right now. Dr. IRS looked at me. He looked at the black binder. He looked at the future crashing down on him. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll do it. The nurse walked in, holding a plastic cup. Here we go, honey. Nice cold water. I slumped back over. I put the glasses back on. I let my hand tremble as I reached for the cup. Thank you, I squeaked. Is the doctor done? Dr. IRS stood up. He smoothed his suit jacket. His hands were shaking worse than mine. Yes, Dr. IRS said, his voice tight. We're done here. I have everything I need for the judge. He didn't look at me again. He grabbed his clipboard and practically ran out of the room. I drank the water. It was lukewarm, but it tasted like victory. I had the doctor. I had the evidence. I had an ally on the outside. Now, I just had to wait for Tuesday. I had to sit in this smell of bleach and sadness for 5 more days, knowing that just down the hall, Mrs. Higgins was staring at a wall. Hold on, Martha, I thought. Just a few more days. The audit is almost closed. The silence in the courtroom was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and the confident drone of Kymberly's lawyer. He was a tall man with a tan that looked like it came from a bottle and a suit that cost more than most people's cars. He was pacing back and forth, gesturing toward Kymberly as if she were Mother Teresa. Your Honor, he boomed, checking his notes. We are asking for full, permanent guardianship over the estate and person of Ms. Hilda Grayson. This is not a request we make lightly, but as you can see, Ms. Grayson is confused. She is paranoid. She is clinging to a scrapbook of old photos like a child. He pointed at the black binder on my lap. I clutched it tighter, letting my head drop low. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, Ms. Torres is uniquely qualified for this role. She is a professional. She has successfully managed the guardianships of 5 other seniors in Scottsdale over the last 2 years. She has a track record of compassion and financial stewardship. She knows how to handle these difficult end-of-life transitions. I almost smiled. He had just walked right into the trap. He was using her crimes as her resume. He was telling the judge that because she had gotten away with it 5 times, she should be allowed to do it a 6th time. We ask that the court grant the petition immediately, the lawyer concluded. Every day Ms. Grayson remains in control of her finances is another day her pension is at risk. He sat down. Kymberly dabbed her eyes again, looking at the judge with hopeful, wet lashes. The judge, the man with the fake Rolex, looked at his watch. He looked bored. He picked up his gavel. Very well, the judge said. Unless there is any objection, I am inclined to grant the petition. Ms. Grayson appears unable to represent herself. This was it. I stood up. I did it slowly, leaning heavily on the table, my hand trembling. I kept my shoulders hunched. I kept the messy hair hanging in my face. Your Honor, I whispered, my voice cracking. Kymberly let out a loud, dramatic sigh. She leaned over to her lawyer and whispered loud enough for the microphone to catch, "Oh, God, here she goes again." The judge looked over his glasses. "Miss Grayson, do you have something to say?" "Can I stammered, shuffling out from behind the table. I hugged the binder to my chest. "Can I just show you my pictures? Kimmy says they're trash, but I want you to see them." Kymberly rolled her eyes. She actually rolled them. She looked at the bailiff as if to say, "Can you believe I have to deal with this?" "Make it brief, Miss Grayson," the judge said, checking the clock. "Bring the book up." I walked to the bench. I shuffled my feet, dragging the heels of my loafers. I looked every inch the feeble, broken woman Kymberly needed me to be. I reached the wooden railing. I was 3 feet from the judge. I was 5 feet from the court reporter. I placed the black binder on the judge's ledge. And then I stopped acting. I stood up straight. I rolled my shoulders back, dropping the hunch I had held for hours. I took off the smudged reading glasses and folded them neatly, placing them in my pocket. I smoothed the front of my stained cardigan. I looked at Kymberly. I didn't look at her with confusion. I looked at her with the cold, dead stare of a federal auditor who has just found the 2nd set of books. "The petitioner claims I cannot manage money," I said. My voice filled the room. It wasn't shaky. It was the voice that had made CEOs sweat in deposition rooms for 30 years. I submit to the court that the petitioner, Kymberly Torres, is currently running a Ponzi scheme involving 5 other wards of the state. And I have the receipts. The silence that followed was absolute. Kymberly's jaw dropped. Her lawyer froze halfway through packing his briefcase. "Excuse me?" the judge asked, blinking. "Open the binder, Your Honor," I commanded. I didn't ask. I commanded. The judge opened the black cover. "Tab 1, I said. The petitioner's lawyer cited her experience with 5 other seniors. "Let's look at Mrs. Higgins. Victim number 1. The judge looked down. "That is a photograph of Mrs. Higgins's hand on the day she was institutionalized," I said, pointing to the page. "Note the ring. A 3-carat vintage diamond, insured for $25,000. I pointed to the next photo. "And that," I said, pointing to Kymberly, "is a photo from the petitioner's Instagram account dated 3 weeks later. Note the ring on her finger. It is the same ring. I have included the jeweler's appraisal matching the serial numbers." Kymberly instinctively covered her left hand with her right. Her face drained of color. "Tab 2, I continued relentlessly. "Mr. Henderson. The petitioner sold his home on November 12th for $400,000. Market value was $800,000. The buyer was Torres Care Management, LLC. She sold the house to herself. Your Honor, that is self-dealing. That is a felony." The judge was flipping pages now, faster and faster. He wasn't looking at his watch anymore. He was looking at bank statements. He was looking at the flow of money. But where did the money go? I asked rhetorically. Tab 3. Wire transfers. The petitioner moved the proceeds from the sale of Mr. Henderson's home and Mrs. Higgins's estate to a bank in Las Vegas, Nevada. She used the funds to pay off gambling debts and a lease on a Range Rover. Kymberly's lawyer stood up. "Objection. This is hearsay. These are the ravings of These are certified bank records obtained from the county recorder and public tax filings." I shouted over him. "I spent 30 years as a senior field agent for the IRS Large Business and International Division. I know how to track a wire transfer, and your client committed wire fraud the moment that money crossed state lines." Kymberly stood up. "Mom, stop it. You're making a scene. You're sick." "I am not sick, Kymberly," I said, turning to face her. "I am undercover." At that exact moment, the courtroom doors burst open. It wasn't the police. It was a young man in a waiter's uniform, out of breath, clutching a manila envelope and a USB drive. It was Leo. "I have the rest." Leo yelled, running down the center aisle. The bailiff stepped forward to stop him, but I held up my hand. "That is my witness," I told the judge. "Let him approach." Leo ran to the bench. He was shaking, but he didn't stop. He slammed the envelope down next to the binder. "These are the affidavits." Leo panted. I went to the families. Mrs. Higgins's niece in Ohio. Mr. Henderson's son in Texas. Kymberly told them their relatives didn't want to see them. She blocked their numbers. She isolated them so she could steal everything. They signed sworn statements this morning. The judge looked at Leo, then at the envelope, then at me. He looked at Kymberly, who was now trembling, her white suit looking less like armor and more like a shroud. "There is one more thing, Your Honor," I said. "The medical report." The judge looked at the sealed envelope on his desk, the one Dr. Ayres had submitted that morning. "The petitioner claims I am incompetent based on the evaluation of Dr. Gregory Ayres." I said, "Dr. Ayres is currently under investigation for receiving kickbacks from the petitioner's shell company. I gave him a choice yesterday: go to prison with her or tell the truth." The judge picked up the letter opener. He slit the envelope. Kymberly held her breath. She thought Dr. Ayres was loyal. She thought her bribes had bought his silence. The judge unfolded the paper. He read it. His eyebrows shot up. "Let the record show," the judge read aloud, his voice echoing in the silent room, "that Dr. Ayres has recanted his previous findings. The report states, MS. Hilda Grayson is fully alert, oriented, and highly intelligent. She is being held against her will at Paradise Valley Care Center as part of a financial scheme orchestrated by Kymberly Torres." Kymberly let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. "He's lying. She got to him. She's crazy." "Enough," the judge roared. He slammed the file shut. He looked at Kymberly with a disgust that was absolute. "Ms. Torres, this court sees a lot of family disputes, but we rarely see a criminal enterprise mapped out in a 3-ring binder." Kymberly grabbed her purse. She looked at the door. She looked at the exit sign. She realized the walls were closing in. She took a step toward the aisle. "Bailiff," the judge barked, "bar the door. Nobody leaves this courtroom." The bailiff, a large man who had been dozing 10 minutes ago, stepped in front of the double doors, crossing his arms. Kymberly froze. She looked back at me. Her eyes were wide with terror. For the first time in her life, she wasn't looking at Mom. She was looking at the auditor. "Your Honor," I said, my voice calm and final, "I request that this guardianship petition be dismissed with prejudice, and I request that the evidence in this binder be turned over immediately to the Federal Bureau of Investigation." "Granted," the judge said. "And Ms. Torres, you might want to call a criminal defense attorney. Your civil lawyer can't help you where you're going." He reached for his phone to call the marshals. I looked at Kymberly. She slumped into her chair, burying her face in her hands. She had come here to steal a pension. Instead, she had just handed me the confession to a 15-year felony. I picked up my black binder. I dusted off the cover. The audit was closed. Now, the sentencing could begin. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut is a distinct, mechanical noise. It's a sound I heard a few times in my career when an audit went particularly bad for a tax cheat, but I never expected to hear it applied to the wrists of my own child. 2 federal marshals stepped into the courtroom from the side door. They didn't run. They moved with the heavy, inevitable pace of consequences arriving. Kymberly stood up, knocking her chair over. Her face wasn't perfectly made up anymore. Her mascara was smeared, and her expensive white suit looked suddenly like a costume she didn't know how to wear. "Mom," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Mom, tell them to stop. You can't let them take me." I stood by the judge's bench, my hand resting on the black binder. I didn't look away. I owed it to Mrs. Higgins and Mr. Henderson to watch this. "I can't stop them, Kymberly," I said quietly. "You broke federal law. You crossed state lines with stolen money. This isn't a family dispute anymore. It's a crime scene." The marshals took her arms. They pulled them behind her back. Click, click. Kymberly twisted in their grip, looking at me with wild, desperate eyes. "I did this for us, Mom. I did it so we could have a better life. I was going to pay it back." It was the lie every embezzler tells. They always think they're going to pay it back after one big win at the casino or one big real estate deal. But they never do. They just dig the hole deeper until it becomes a grave. "No, Kymberly," I said, my voice steady despite the breaking of my heart. "You didn't do this for us. You did this to us." They led her out the side door. She was still screaming my name when the heavy wood door slammed shut, cutting off the sound. The silence that rushed back into the courtroom was deafening. The judge looked at me. He looked shaken. "Ms. Grayson," he said, "the court apologizes for the ordeal you have endured. The guardianship petition is dismissed with prejudice. And this binder is now evidence." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. "Please make sure the FBI gets the USB drive as well. My associate has copies." I looked back at Leo. He was slumped in the back row, looking exhausted but relieved. He gave me a small thumbs up. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but when you have a forensic audit mapped out in a 3-ring binder, they turn a lot faster. Because I had done the work, because I had traced the routing numbers and the shell companies, the investigation moved at lightning speed. The FBI didn't have to go digging. I had handed them the map. 2 weeks later, the indictment came down. United States versus Kymberly Torres. 15 counts of wire fraud. 5 counts of elder abuse. Money laundering. Conspiracy. Kymberly didn't get bail. The judge deemed her a flight risk because of the offshore accounts I had uncovered. She sat in a county jail cell wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of her linen suits. The trial lasted 3 days. It would have been longer, but Dr. Ayres testified against her. He took the deal I offered him. He told the jury everything about the kickbacks, the fake competency exams, and how Kymberly targeted seniors with no family. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When the sentence was read, I was there. I sat in the back row. 12 years, the judge said, in a federal correctional institution. 12 years. Kymberly would be 57 when she got out. Her youth would be gone. Her career was over. She would never be allowed to hold a real estate license or act as a fiduciary for another human being as long as she lived. It was justice. But as I walked out of the courthouse, I didn't feel happy. I felt a heavy, quiet grief. I had protected myself. Yes, but I had lost my daughter. The little girl I taught to ride a bike was gone, consumed by greed. But I didn't have time to wallow. I had work to do. Kymberly's arrest broke the lock on the other 5 guardianships. Mrs. Higgins, Mr. Henderson, the Rothsteins, and Ms. Clark were immediately released from state custody. I used my pension, the pension Kymberly tried to steal, to hire a team of forensic accountants to claw back what we could. We couldn't get their houses back. Those had been sold to innocent buyers. But we went after Kymberly's assets. The FBI seized the Range Rover. They seized her jewelry. They seized the contents of her bank accounts. In Nevada, it wasn't everything, but it was something. I visited Mrs. Higgins a month later. She had been moved to a legitimate, compassionate facility paid for by the State Victims Fund. She was sitting in a garden, real sunlight hitting her face. She didn't recognize me, but she was smiling. She was holding a flower. She wasn't drugged. She was free. That was enough. A few days later, I drove to the Silver Spoon Diner. It was early, just before the morning rush. The smell of bacon and old coffee welcomed me like an old friend. Leo was behind the counter, wiping down the laminate. He looked tired. He had dark circles under his eyes. "Mrs. Grayson," he said, his face lighting up, "I haven't seen you since the trial. How are you?" "I'm safe, Leo," I said, "and please call me Hilda. You saved my life. We're past formalities." I sat in our usual booth in the back corner. Leo brought me a coffee, black, and dry wheat toast without me asking. "I have something for you," I said. I reached into my purse. I didn't pull out a binder this time. I pulled out a check. I slid it across the table. Leo picked it up. He looked at the number. His eyes went wide, and he almost dropped it. "Hilda, Mrs. Grayson, this is $20,000. I can't take this." "It's not a tip, Leo," I said sternly. "It's tuition." He stared at me, his mouth open. "I checked the tuition rates at Arizona State," I said. "This covers your next 2 years. You're going to finish that degree. You're going to get your CPA license, and you're going to join the FBI or the IRS, and you're going to catch the next Kymberly before she hurts anyone." Tears welled up in his eyes. He wiped them away with his apron. "I don't know what to say. Why would you do this?" "Because the world needs auditors with a heart, Leo," I said, reaching across the table to pat his hand. "There are wolves out there. We need sheepdogs. Go get your degree. He nodded, clutching the check. I won't let you down. I know you won't, I said. Now refill my coffee. It's getting cold. That evening, I sat on my back porch in Scottsdale. The sun was setting, painting the desert sky in streaks of purple and orange. The air was cooling down. I had a glass of iced tea in my hand. My phone sat on the table next to me. It wasn't Kymberly's phone anymore. It was mine. I had bought a new one with a new number. I opened my banking app. I logged in. My pension deposit had hit that morning. The balance was exactly what it should be. Every penny was accounted for. No unauthorized transfers. No strange withdrawals. I was 77 years old. I lived alone. My daughter was in prison. Some people might look at my life and see tragedy, but I looked at the sunset, and I felt a profound sense of peace. I was safe. I was solvent, and I was free. I took a sip of tea. I had spent my life auditing others, looking for their mistakes. But in the end, the most important audit I ever conducted was on my own life. I trimmed the liability. I secured the assets. They call it the golden years because everyone wants to steal your gold. But they forgot that silver hair doesn't mean a soft mind. I protected my pension, but more importantly, I protected my dignity. Have you ever had to audit your own family? Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand to protect yourself from the people you love? Tell me your story in the comments. And remember, trust but verify.